Hey guys, what's up everybody? I think by now we all know there is no more Stand Up Magazine in 2025, at least not printed. So I decided I'm gonna go through magazine by magazine and we're gonna do a history series of SUP, wing and foil, how everything started, and somehow digitizing the Stand Up magazines from print to video. So we're gonna start with the first issue, how and when it came out, and the cover and everything, the cool stories inside. We had like first interview with Sonni Hönscheid. We had my first big interview with Dave Kalama. Stories from Switzerland, urban SUP already back then, but here we are counting 2011. I've been working on my website and publishing SUP content for a year and a half, and there is no magazine in German. So I cannot not do a magazine. I'm like, I need to do this. I love photography. I love putting my content on another medium other than digital, so it has a little bit more longevity. It doesn't drown in the feed. So I'm like, screw this, I'm gonna do a magazine. And I made this teensy tiny little SUP mag as an experiment. So I decided, hey, there is a SUP Expo, Pedal Expo in Germany. I'm like, I'm gonna make a few hundred magazines of this, and I'm gonna send it to the Pedal Expo that just started to integrate SUP into their actually kayak and canoe paddle expo, and I was like, what a good idea to present it to the industry there. And this cover here is on West Maui with my buddy. We drove around. We wanted to find a cool shot where we combine wave and SUP and bring across the SUP as a surf sport, but doesn't need to be surfed. You can do it in flat water and you can just cruise around, and I really do still love this shot of my buddy Jamie. And we have, like in the beginning, we have this cool opening spread from a brand named Tahoe SUP. There was a Swiss distributor that helped us and supported us with the magazine. So that was really nice. Second spread, yes. Be in the moment. That was me doing races on Maui. I was participating in all the Olukais, the Nash Championships. We had the Maliko races. It was really cool. So I wanted to showcase that. And also we had our editorial first early contributors. I want to shout out, there was a Swiss guy named Thomas Oswald. He was a really cool expedition guy. We had Martin Brüderli, a early adapter of the sport, with an urban story that we're going to show you guys. Daryl Wong supported me with pictures. Daryl Wong is a known surf photographer here in Maui from back in the day. Peter Bartel, shout out to him. He supported me a lot with content, just to name a few. And then the one thing that was really like my big thing was pictures. We want to showcase pictures, and we want to showcase the diversity of the sport that just really started to get a foothold in Central Europe, in the flat water community. And nothing better than have, like, you know, shots like here, urban space with Martin in Zurich, Robbie in Hawaii, and then Thomas in bone cold winter wonderland in Switzerland. So showing this is a sport that can be done anywhere, everywhere. That was kind of like the main message. We had more pictures here. There was another one of myself cruising on waterfalls on Maui. Peter Bartel, River SUP. He was one of the early River SUP guys, besides Dan Gewehr, who was also a part of this magazine in the early days. And we had these guys. Neil Parmenter was a very early contributor and also a distributor for C4 Waterman. That was a big brand back then that completely disappeared, and they went up with their inflatable SUPs, because C4 was one of the very early inflatable SUPs, and they did like a Swiss mountain lake story. That was really cool. 11 City Tour, first, one of the first media partnerships with 11 City Tour. We did that. It was really cool. Some books came out already, how-to books over in Germany. Peter Bartel introducing his own book. We had our own balance trainers already with Yucca Hawaii. So we showcased those. We had a whole little how-to page. Nothing too much, because the magazine was never really about how-tos too much. We wanted to more like do timeless content. And then, yeah, here, nice ad, C4 Waterman. What a cool brand it was. Sadly, it went away. We did some safety tips, big ad for the book, the how-to book. There was a German publishing house that did that how-to book. Oh, and another thing I wanted to show you guys is one of the early supporters, interestingly, early signs of the kayak world. So that was the German Kayak magazine did a little ad, and I supported them with online content, and they supported me back with a little bit of money and an ad, because I really wanted to do a magazine with them together. We had a partnership going on where we helped each other out. They were interested in the sport but didn't really know where to go with it, and I'm like, we need to do a magazine, guys. They didn't want to do a magazine. They were too nervous about this whole thing, not much of risk takers, so I decided to make my own magazine, but they supported it with their little ad. And then this was super stoked. I mean, this was the first interview with Sonni Hönscheid before she became the international name that she was. She had an early sponsorship with Nash, a small one. That's a picture of her in Hamburg. We have a picture of her with her boyfriend back then, Locke Eggers, who sadly is no longer with us anymore. Locke is and was a very early adopter of SUP surfing in big waves, friends with Robbie Nash, Laird Hamilton, big wave surfer, as well as downwind racing. So he was a big pioneer in the sport. Sadly, his name never really came up a lot, but definitely somebody that needs to be mentioned. And Sonni, we just started with her art. You know, she had her art going, and we started with Yucca Hawaii, my skateboard brand here. We started a art partnership with her where we launched a skateboard with her art, and it was really successful. It went really well. Some questions that were asked back then, right? What was the questions that we had? Where do you see SUP in the next years in Germany and in Europe? And Sonni clearly stated that everything will be happening in the flat water segment. And I am sure SUP will be big in Germany as well. And she is referring back to the Jever SUP SUP World Cup that was really ahead of its time. The legendary one in Hamburg back in 2010, 2008 and 2009, I want to say, around those times. And she really saw the potential there, that whole surf lifestyle, that SUP, that what's it all about, really will have a strong foothold and grow in Europe and in Germany. And she also was very positive on my last question about Olympics, that SUP will be Olympic someday. And then here, this was the SUP urban story with Martin, and he was on a really cool early pioneer board called Uli boards. They were like the first SUP, the first inflatable SUPs, if you guys remember those, out of California. And they never really went anywhere after, and never heard of them ever again. But in the early days of SUP, Uli boards was really a thing, and Martin was kind of the guy that hopped on the tram in the city with his rolled up board and a little trolley, went up the lake, and then kind of paddled down the lake, all using public transport. So that was a really intriguing story back then, and still is, and I'm glad we have it here, being kept in a time capsule. And then of course the one thing that I was always proud of is the first interview with Dave Kalama. I mean, like, Dave Kalama, what a name in big wave surfing he already was, windsurfing. I mean, the guy does it all, and here we are in SUP, and our path is crossing. And I had an interview with Dave Kalama. That was back then. He was with Nash, and the Julia at Nash, who helped me out a lot back then, she lined that interview up. It was really cool, and we talked a lot about how SUP came about and how that legendary story actually transpired between him and Laird, a story that is finally being told by Laird Hamilton in my last magazine, in number 25, which we will cover in a later video, of course. But it was really cool to talk to Dave Kalama early, and I mean, he was an SUP racer. He was at all the contests, at all the races, so it was really cool. And again, we have one question, is like, how do you evaluate the future of the sport? So that was a question we had 14 years ago, and he said here, and I'm translating this, he said that the sport will go into different disciplines, just like snowboarding went into different disciplines. He's talking about flat water in compared to downwinders, or downwinders in compared to SUP surfing. So he saw big potential back then, also in SUP surfing. He was also talking about recreational paddling, that this will be very big and develop a lot. And he was totally right. SUP became such a recreational sport. So that was like some early questions. He had his Kalama camp already going on back then, so we were talking about that. And then the last story was, and that's kind of the funny how it ended, is with Thomas Oschwald, the guy that always did expeditions, Swiss guy, always on an expedition. We had a few more stories with him. This one, he went from Switzerland to Bordeaux in the search of the perfect wave. So he was telling us a story how he went through different rivers, connecting all from Switzerland through rivers and inland water canals into Bordeaux and the Atlantic Ocean. And then eventually we continue the story. But then how funny is this? This is the inside cover, and then the story here, it just ends. The story just ends in mid-sentence, and I don't know what happened. I never noticed, and the thing just went out. So it's a total donkey move, total mistake, how the story just went, how he wanted to reach his goal, and then it then. And there's like, what's next? It's gone. So like that's too funny, like what a donkey. But it was my first magazine. I laid it out, everything, and I put it in a format, and I sent it to a printer in Germany. Can you make me 100 of those? And send it to the Paddle Expo in Nuremberg. And also a shout out back then. Nash was very instrumental. They were super early with SUP, and thanks to Julia, I always had great support there. It is really a cool time capsule, this magazine, to see what was going on in 2011. What did I put to print? What were kind of the important things? And the SUP industry received it really well. A year later, I went to the Paddle Expo myself. That's going to be for another video. And I started to make a biannual magazine based on the success of this magazine. And we're going to link this all together in a series. And you guys are going to be stoked to see more in the next video.